what's policing like in Canada, and how is it different from how it is here in the States, and how did you end up becoming a police officer? Let's start there. How you became a cop and how it's different.
Well, I became a police officer in the late 80s. That's how old I am. I was 10 at the time. No, at that time, there were not, I took a degree in English literature and political science at university, and there wasn't a great call for people with undergrad degrees for jobs in that particular discipline. And I just kind of thought policing might be fun. And I had some neighbors who were police officers who thought it was a great job. So thought, I'll give it a go, give it, 5 years, see what happens. And next thing I know is 30 years later and it's over. So it was a good run.
It's kind of funny how that works, right? You're just like, I'm going to do this for a little bit. You hear it all the time, like people like who move somewhere. We're going to move to Nashville just for a few years. And next thing you know, 40 years later, 3 kids out of college, and that's just how it works.
Yeah, exactly. And when I started, even now, our gun laws are very different in Canada than in the States. And I think that's a big difference in our crimes. And who's committing them, how they're being committed. And I remember when I started in the 80s, most of the fights were sort of hand to hand. It was mostly fist fights. And then in the early 90s, we went to knives. And I remember distinctly in Toronto, it was like a switch where people were carrying knives all the time. And now we have people carrying guns, but it's not like it is where you are. And again, because our laws are really different around that.
Right. So now you as an officer, what are you equipped with to protect yourself? Like I'm assuming, like here in the States, right? They have a baton, they got handcuffs, they might have some kind of spray, and also, of course, they have their firearm. Now, when you're in Canada, do you also have a firearm?
Yes. Yeah. When I started, what we had was a Smith & Wesson 6-shooter, which is really inaccurate unless you shoot a lot. And we had handcuffs. And we had, at that time, they gave us what was called a stick that nobody could actually work very, very well. They switched that over to an expandable baton, which I think most of your people now have. And they switched us over to the Glocks, which are a lot easier to operate, a lot easier to load, all that sort of stuff. And the officers now have the pepper spray, handcuffs, they have the Glocks, they have the expandable batons, and they have tasers.
I forgot about the taser. Of course, the taser. So I'm glad you said that, like, the pistol itself is inaccurate, because I say that to anybody who's like never shot a gun. Because a common argument here in America is, why can't a cop just aim for the leg, right? Why do they have to shoot them in the chest? Well, the answer is because pistols, particularly, are very inaccurate weapons. If you've ever shot a pistol, it's super inaccurate. I've only shot one a few times, and I'm a very bad shot. So, and they teach you to shoot for the chest, because that's what the center of gravity is. It's most likely to hit someone. If you're in a highly populated area, you're aiming for the leg, hits the asphalt, bounce up, hit someone else.
Well, mostly what
that's
they
worst
talk
case
about, scenario. Most of it is it's to stop the threat. That's right. The language that's used. And so obviously the largest sort of body of mass is the best spot, and you're most likely to hit it, right? Because as you say, again, it's not like a target practice where you're doing your breathing and you're zenned out and you're totally focused. It's usually a split-second decision where the officer pulls out their gun. They're in a shoot or don't shoot situation, and so the chances of hitting anything realistically are pretty slim. And so that's why they say center of mass, and that's what you aim for.
Now, do you? I'm trying to think if U.S. cops even have like assault rifles. I know we have the riot gear. We have the rifles with the rubber bullets. Now, do you only have handguns, or is there other types of, I guess, weaponry, for lack of a better term? And cops here have like the big SUVs that are like bulletproof and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, our in Toronto we call the emergency task force. It's the same as your SWAT people, right? They have the big trucks, and they've got everything, all the toys in there. And there's shotguns that the officers have that I believe they can take them out patrolling, but they're in the back. Now the cars have them so that the locks are in the car themselves. So you can take the shotgun out. But again, Toronto's a large urban center. We've got like 3 million people here. So you don't really want to be walking around with a shotgun.
Yeah, that would make, even if I was one holding the gun, I'd be very uncomfortable. Like, no, because like I live outside New York City, so I go into New York City for work a few times a week. And in around Times Square, there's the police. There's a police center like right in Times Square, and every day there's guys out there just holding assault rifles, or they're in Port Authority just holding assault rifles, just in case. 'Cause, it's a major hub. It makes sense. But even if I was that person, I'd be like, I'd feel uncomfortable. I don't get that uncomfortable walking by them, but if I was holding the gun, I'd feel uncomfortable because you're immediately a target. Even when it's there to protect yourself and others, you are a target.
Well, yeah, and that's, I mean, when I first started in policing, they were just coming out with the bulletproof vests, and it was optional to wear it or not. Now, when I was going through training, they just came out with them, and so we wore them. But when we were sent to the divisions, we were seen as kind of like the weenies who were wearing them. And now everybody wears them, the Kevlar vests, and they're really, really hot, and they're heavy, and they're uncomfortable, and all of that stuff. But yeah, the option is not good because you're a target.